Hey everybody, it's Lisa with True North Homeschool Academy. I am here with the lovely Miss Anna Naub,
Hello.
and we are going to talk about Shakespeare today and Hamlet. We have a
Yeah.
6-week summer class that is starting June 5th, well, the week of June 5th, that
Mhm.
Anna is leading on Hamlet. And Anna's teaching some other really cool classes we're going to tell you about, but we're going to focus this little chat on Hamlet and why it's so important for your high schoolers to study one of the most famous plays in the world. And I could go on and on about Shakespeare because I love it, but you know more than I do about Shakespeare. You're the great teacher for Shakespeare. So Anna, tell us why you chose Hamlet for this 6-week summer session and why high schoolers should take it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first came to you saying I wanted to do a full year Shakespeare class, you said, yes, that sounds amazing. And then I thought, how can I shove as many plays as possible into a year? And it worked out that we're doing 3 plays in the fall and 3 plays in the spring.
Yeah.
And I tried to get a few of each kind of genre, basically.
Yep.
So we're doing Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer Night, and Much Ado in the fall.
Yep.
And then we're doing Macbeth, Henry V, and Merchant of Venice in the spring.
Okay, so
And
pause for a minute. For those who are not familiar with Shakespeare, tell us what you mean by genres because it's the same author. What do you mean? What kind of genres did he
yeah,
write about?
so Shakespeare wrote a number of different types of plays. He has histories that are, hello, Nora. Can you go back?
We have a kiddo on
Yeah.
deck here.
Um, so he has histories. So we have like Richard III, we have the Henrys, and then we also have the comedies like Much Ado About Nothing, Midsummer Night's Dream. Technically, Merchant of Venice is also a comedy, which is going to be a whole thing in and of itself.
Oh, fun.
Uh, and of course, we then have the tragedies
Yep,
like Macbeth
yep,
and Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet.
yep.
There's a running joke: if your name is in the title, you're going to die. So,
It's like the red shirt of Star Trek.
yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
And so I got to the end of that, picking, of course, my personal favorite plays,
yeah,
and went, but where can I do Hamlet?
yeah.
And I just thought that Hamlet would be a perfect summer class because it is a little on the longer side. Like Midsummer
Mhm.
Night's Dream here is technically 5 acts, but it's very small compared to
Yeah.
other ones. Um, I am sorry, we have Tiny Human in here again. Go out, baby. Go on. Okay, Daddy's gonna get you a snack. Chaos always. Chaos
I
always.
know. Oh, it's
Um,
so hard when they're
and
hungry.
yeah, exactly. And we never feed them ever. So Hamlet is a little bit longer, but Hamlet is considered the invention of the human. Hamlet is
Ah,
considered Shakespeare's greatest character ever written.
yep.
Most people don't realize that there is actually a Your Hamlet, which was essentially a Hamlet story. Hamlet is based off of a historical, semi-real Danish
Oh,
person, and so there was kind of like an original play story written about this, and
yeah.
Shakespeare took it and
Ah,
just revamped it and turned it into this masterpiece.
ah.
Uh, and Hamlet specifically, his character has more depth and
Mhm.
humanity to it than any other character that Shakespeare has ever
Mm,
written.
mm,
I believe Hamlet, as the main character, has more lines than any
mm,
other character in any Shakespeare plays. Uh,
mm.
he has a lot of soliloquies. He does a lot of talking to himself or to Uric, right? Poor Sir Uric, he knew him well. And so I felt like that didn't need academics as much as it needed conversation. We needed to be
Mm,
sitting and talking about this and picking this apart. What motivations do we have here? What do we get from his humanity
yeah.
here in these parts? Everything from his interactions with his mother, which have
Mhm.
been interpreted so many different ways,
Yeah.
to his interactions with Ophelia. We have Rosencrantz and I'm blanking on the other name. the two buddies, and how like his
Yeah.
yeah, I can never remember the crazy names. And one of the things that I'm excited to do is Hamlet has been done
Yeah.
by some of just the greatest actors of our time, right? We have Benedict Cumberbatch,
Yeah.
um, we have Patrick Stewart,
Yeah.
uh, and I have been like collecting snippets of their various versions and comparing, how they all interpreted one
Very
scene.
cool. Yeah.
Because there is so much interpretation,
Yeah.
and Hamlet just has a depth to it
Yeah.
that the other plays certainly do in their own, various forms. But Hamlet is just singular,
Yeah.
and no other play has that singularness.
Yeah.
Even Henry the Fourth and Henry the Fifth, Good Prince Hal has Falstaff, right? We
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
the Seven Ages of Man, not even spoken by Henry, right?
Mhm.
And great plays were doing Henry the Fifth
Yeah.
because, of course, we had to do the St. Crispin's Day speech.
Yes.
Um, there's just a singularness
Mhm.
to Hamlet that allows you as a listener and as a participant to connect in
Yeah.
a way that you just don't get in the other ones. And
Yeah.
so I thought that it would be perfect for the summer.
I love what you said about Shakespeare was he developed the human in literature, and we've talked about that before, but just share again because it's such an important literary
Yeah.
time. It really changed how we viewed literature because these were plays, and so they were performed. But tell us what that means for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah. So one of the things that Harold Bloom is an incredible, or was, I should say, Shakespeare scholar. The invention of the human is one of the, I'll say, kind of like our textbook for the full year class. But he talks about how prior to Shakespeare in literature, the closest thing that we maybe have is kind of Canterbury Tales or
Mhm.
even King David in the Bible.
Yeah.
Characters didn't have character or personality. They didn't have this depth. You weren't hearing or seeing their internal dialogues and that internal turmoil, or motivations in the same way. Beowulf, we've talked extensively
Yeah.
about Beowulf since I taught medieval. You kind of almost get it from
Yeah.
Beowulf, but Beowulf is told from an external, right? It's an
Mhm.
epic. It's somebody relaying a
Yes.
story. Canterbury Tales is also very external, right?
Mhm.
Chaucer is giving you, this is what the person dressed like, this is how they kind of behaved, and
Yeah.
then that person tells a tale or a story. Whereas Shakespeare, in a way that no
Yeah.
author before him did, gave his characters humanity, gave them internal conflict. This is my mother, but she's also the queen, and she has made a poor choice. And how do I reconcile this because my father's only been dead for 2 weeks?
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I mean, he gives real life struggles and quirks. I mean, like Midsummer Night's Dream, I'm working on the study guides. I'm like, this is so goofy, right? Um,
Yeah.
and but he contrasts that
Yeah.
with his other plays, again, with this depth
Mhm.
that no other author prior to him
Yeah.
had ever been able to create. And we can see that it works and that it's standing because to this day, we are still making
Yeah.
movies
Yeah.
based off of Shakespeare.
Yeah. The amazing characters he developed. Yeah. Anna, in this age of 9-second videos on Instagram and TikTok, maybe 3 or 4 second, the short form video, why is it even important for high schoolers to study Shakespeare? I know when I was in high school, this was Brit Lit, this was fourth grade honors English. Everybody who was going to college took it. It was just an automatic assumption
Yeah.
that if you were going to go on to any kind of higher education or wanted to enter the great conversation, meaning of educated people in the world, you had to have some basic understanding, fundamental understanding of Shakespeare. Do you
Yeah.
think that still holds true?
Absolutely. And if for nothing else, Shakespeare is an example of mastery.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you go into, your hope is that you want to do it well. You want to become a master of something, a literal master in a trade,
Yeah.
or an educator, or you
Mhm.
know what? Being a stay-at-home mom is its
Right.
own kind of mastery, right?
Right.
And so, if for nothing else,
Mhm.
you see what it is to do something so explicit and exquisite
Mm.
and done in a way that nobody can touch. And it's
Yeah.
one of the reasons, sidebar, why I'm a bit of a Shakespeare purist. There are people who think that, oh, like, you know, other people wrote plays and Shakespeare
Yeah.
put his name on it or whatever.
Yeah.
Listen, there is no way you cannot replicate Shakespeare. You
Yeah.
you just can't. And he for sure had like apprentices. All the great artists did,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but in you just can't touch what he did. There's no way
I'm
that
in, I'm in the camp with you.
wrote Shakespeare, right?
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Yeah.
And so I think there's just a mastery in the art and the
Yeah.
craft of it. I think it's really cool that we can look at the characterization
Mm.
and peel those apart. We can look at the historical context,
Yeah.
whether that be geopolitical or you know something as goofy as the folklore fairy world, right?
Yeah.
Um, it all was so applicable. And one of the things that I think is also cool about Shakespeare is he wrote for the world. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is he wrote for the poor peasants who were, you know, eating their crust of bread, standing at the foot of the stage, all the way up to Queen Elizabeth and James the First. And he had to write things that were relative to all of that.
Right.
And how do you write something that is relative to a peasant that can make a peasant laugh, that a peasant can understand and relate to, but also make the queen who can chop your head off, you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
laugh or, you know, enjoy it, want to come back again.
Right.
And what other works do we have that can do that
Yeah.
or that has done that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't honestly really know of any.
Yeah. The Bible
The
probably.
Bible, right? Except
Yeah.
for the Bible.
Right. Right.
But even then, at this time, well, Protestants had happened. So, but like again, the Bible was still not readily available
Exactly.
to the general population.
Right. Right.
Ironically, Shakespeare's folio was more readily available than
Interesting.
the Bible at this time.
Yeah.
Um,
Very
in the
fascinating.
early 1600s.
Yeah.
So there's also lots of biblical
There
allegory
are.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
Shakespeare, tons of it. It's one of the it's one of the reasons I actually really like the Folger Shakespeare Library
Yeah.
copies. I want all of my students to have these for the
Yeah.
full year class and for Hamlet, because on the opposite sides, so the play is on this side, there's like definitions,
Yeah.
explanations of things, and anytime there is biblical allegory, it's explained or they tell you like what the reference is.
Nice.
And so it's really nice to be able to see the Bible applied in art. This was considered, you know, secular. This was normal. There was
Right.
no real separation between
Yep. Right.
Christian
Right.
and secular lit. And so this is
Yeah.
kind of like throwing it all in. And especially with some of them, he does pull in some actual mythology.
Yeah.
Midsummer Night is the Athenians, literally.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But Hamlet specifically, he has biblical allegory there, and especially with playing God. And look, you know, we're talking
Mhm.
to ghosts. There are
Yeah.
literal ghosts, which, funny enough, Shakespeare was known to play the ghost. That was his favorite.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when Shakespeare actually stepped on stage, he was often a father, a ghost,
Oh,
some kind
interesting.
of old figure. He was
Yeah.
never like the main character. He was not Hamlet
Interesting.
himself. He wrote it
The
for other people.
the original Stan Lee.
Yeah, he for sure is. So
Love
um,
it.
it doesn't matter what you're going to go into.
Right.
Um, Shakespeare is relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. which is why he's so timeless. What are you going to do in the 6-week class? How are you going to get through the whole play in 6 weeks? And what can the students expect from a 6-week class? Are they going to be just reading every day, all day long?
I wish, right? So the first 2 weeks, we actually talk about a lot of that context, a lot of that historical context, kind of
Yeah.
like the background of Shakespeare. I am a super firm believer. You cannot have history without literature, and you cannot have literature without history. And so we go over that. Hamlet was written kind of in the middle of his repertoire. If you were to line everything up, it's kind of right there.
Yeah.
And we talk about your Hamlet and kind of that history of the pre-Hamlet before the real Hamlet, and then the modifications Shakespeare made between the 1589 and the 1601, which is what we use as the 1601 final version, basically. And then each week we read about an act. Usually act 4 and 5 are kind of short, and it's like the end kind of just happened. So we will read those. We will actually spend some class time reading these parts out loud. Plays, same for the full year class too. Plays were meant to be heard.
Yeah.
They weren't meant to be read. I love Audible actually has the Folger Shakespeare library on Audible. So you can actually listen to it and read it, and it is word for word.
Wow.
The actual play. But we will be saying some of it out loud and having that, that intonation and that inflection makes a difference. Well, how did you read this? Read it out loud to me. What did you, when you were reading this soliloquy or this response, what did that sound like kind of in your brain?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I read that completely differently.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you read it. Now, why? There's no real right or wrong answer.
Right.
But why did you feel that?
Yeah.
And I like to have these classes fairly Socratic seminar. It is a quarter credit. There's not real assignments or grading, but I have students submit 3 to 5 questions or discussion points each week. And so I'm there to kind of facilitate and help move things along. But it's really cool to see how the students drive the class. We did it last year with 1984. And it was great. There were some days I just sat back and was like, y'all are crushing it today. Like, you don't even need me. And I think that that's a really cool thing about Shakespeare too, is because it is so timeless, because a lot of students, they come in knowing something, right? Almost every student, even if you've never actually read Shakespeare, you probably know the gist of Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
And so everybody comes in with a degree of preconceived notions, understanding, especially at the high school level. Most of them have a general idea about the Renaissance and kind of what we're walking into. And so it's interesting to see how they start translating and pulling things or catching those biblical references, or, oh, they made a reference about the King of France. And like, I remember learning about him, and pulling all of those and extrapolating all of that from the text as they get talking, and one says one thing and the other pings. And it just turns into a really cool hour of, but wait, we're not done. We need like 10 more minutes. That's pretty much how we'll work through it then. The first 2 weeks, like I said, is kind of that background. We talk about literary analysis and looking at it from historical context, from, a modern eyes. Okay, if I have my modern glasses on, what does this look like? If I have just from my own personal experiences, from my own personal life, my own personal travels, how would I feel if my mom married my uncle to my dad died?
It's just so weird.
Well, you respond to that. Okay, well, his response was to trick everybody and pretend to act like a crazy person, but then he really does go crazy. Like, how would I play off that situation, right? So it ends up being just a really more in depth than you would probably expect from high schoolers, but still really fun and engaging, which is kind of the whole point of the class, is to engage with each other and with the literature in a way that you don't necessarily get just sitting at home reading it by yourself.
Yeah. I do think a lot of people are intimidated by lit analysis, and It's really just understanding the pieces that go into a work of literature. It really helps your kids develop critical thinking and is very transferable. So this is a skill they need. It transfers into other areas of their life. If they understand lit analysis, they can analyze a lot of different things. So this is really an important skill, especially as kids are entering high school, getting ready for launching into the adult world. How do they critically think? How do they view things and understand it? A little background information can go a long way. So I love that you're going to add that in. You're also teaching another class this summer, and you did it last year with 1984.
Yes.
And tell us about that class real quick.
Yeah, that class runs very similarly. We spend the first 2 weeks kind of talking about George Orwell, talking about the literary analysis, what that looks like. Actually, we spend 1 week on that. And then I break it up into 5 readings. And pretty much the same concept. They read, everybody comes with 3 to 5 questions or conversation points, and we just talk through the reading and we talk
Yeah.
through that literary analysis.
And what book is this for, the literary?
1984.
1984. And
Yep.
this is an important book for the kids. I mean, I'm seeing so many memes and jokes about like make 1984 fiction again. But I do think like good science fiction writers were a little prophetic, not
Yeah.
biblically prophetic, but they had
Right.
a real good pulse on what was happening in the culture. And George Orwell certainly did. So
Yeah.
I think this is a really important book for your kids, especially now that we're 35 years out from it, you know.
Right. Right.
It's a great and again, 6 weeks, it's a great time for your kids to dive deep into a piece of literature and really understand it. One of the things I love about your classes, all of them, is that you don't overwhelm the kids with reading. And I always felt kind of waterboarded. Like with my Shakespeare class in high school, I literally felt waterboarded. We read the book, we watched a movie, and then bam, we were on to the next thing. And
Yeah.
I remember certain points about each play, but
Yeah.
certainly not in depth, you know.
Right.
So I do like the fact that you slow down and you really give the kids a place to really think through what's going on, what was the point, what was the author's point, how does it hit us? If we look at it from a historical point of view, what does that mean? Versus if we look at it as a modern person, what does that mean?
Sure.
And I love that about your classes. Yeah, so you're going to teach 1984 and Hamlet this summer for the 6 week summer session that runs June 5th to July 15th. And then tell us what you're going to teach in the fall. You've got
Yeah,
some great classes.
so I am teaching a dystopian and apocalyptic lit and comp class, and I taught that this past year. We also read 1984 and Brave New World. I did have students in the summer class take my full year class, and even though we read 1984 in the summer and in the fall, they thought it was great. They had no problems with it.
Yeah.
It was really cool because they felt like they could kind of facilitate conversations
I love it.
a little more because they're like, oh, in the summer we talked about this.
Yeah.
And so that worked out really nicely. And we really get the foundations of what dystopian and apocalyptic literature is and what that looks like.
Yeah.
And they do a group project where they actually get to kind of create their own dystopian apocalyptic world, loosely based off of obviously 1984 and Brave New World. And those turned out super cool. And then in the spring, we spend the first few weeks, they are reading their own book. It's kind of a personal book study. They write a book report. And we do an identity unit. And one of the really big things about dystopian and apocalyptic literature is the government systems, whatever they may be, usually control their people by removing identity or controlling identity.
Right.
And so in order for them to be able to write a story the rest of the semester, I want them to know what identity is so that they can then apply it or the converse to their actual story. And I was surprised by how many of my kids in their feedback ended up saying that that was one of their favorite parts of the class.
I love it. It's so important right now, especially there's a crisis of identity in our youth. Like they're just like, I can create my own identity. Like, you can't be an ancient pharaoh. I mean, if you're
Right,
born as a white kid in America, you're just not going to
right.
get there. And so I think identity is so important because we are in this time where people can take on and it's like a joke, like, who am I today? Where
Yeah,
really, as our identity in Christ, we have a specific identity for a specific purpose. And so
yeah.
to just talk about that in terms of literature, it removes the awkward conversation and
Yeah,
how
it really
personal it
does.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it allows the kids to really explore it in a positive, decent environment where their identity is not being exploited or attacked. And so
yeah,
I think this is a super important class, not only for the great literature and writing that they're doing, but for that unit. It's
yeah.
and you handle it so well. So I
Well, thank
love that
you.
part of the class.
I was very passionate about that unit, and we took that and rolled into the actual writing. We spent 12 weeks
Wow.
writing, and we spent the first, I think, four or 5 weeks of that working on that background planning,
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
setting, on developing a strong character, on doing that pre-planning, and like the story mountains,
Yeah.
and even things as simple as like vocabulary. Like we did a fun word map game where I put like sad, happy, angry,
Yeah.
and was like, okay, guys, throw up like synonyms and like
Yeah.
different words you can use for that. And high school kids, they thought it was like the most fun thing ever.
Funnest thing. Yeah.
And so we just worked on that. And then we spent a lot of time. I did small groups and partners and moved them around. And each week they had to upload a draft. So
Yeah.
they couldn't wait until the last week to just like write a whole paper.
Yeah.
They had to be working on it every week, whether it
Yeah.
was 5 minutes or 5 hours. I had kids that were like, I sat down and I looked up and I'd been working for 3 hours. Like,
Oh, I love it.
um, and so they got to work with each other, see each
Yeah.
other's stories, help each other. Like, man, I'm struggling on this scene. I don't know how to make this point connect to this point. And so it was just really cool to see that. And I'm excited to see another class do that again.
Yeah.
They created book covers. I had them create soundtracks and to
Yeah.
go with mood and
Oh.
tone. And so they really took what they learned in that fall
Mhm.
and we're able to turn around and go, okay, we read good literature.
Yeah.
Now we have to try and create good literature too, and create good literature for each other because they were reading
Yeah.
it so
I
much.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was dystopian and apocalyptic lit and comp. And then, excuse me, the second class I'm teaching again is Austen Bronte.
Yeah.
We spent the fall reading Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility, and then the spring reading Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre.
Mhm.
And we had a fabulous time with that. We had a lot of fun making fun of the Victorians and making fun of all of the drama. And who comes up with this? Who comes up with this? I had one student, she would message me like in the middle of the week
Yeah.
between classes and be like, I am traumatized by this reading this book. What are we doing? Who comes up with this? Like, Wuthering Heights is insane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, welcome to the insanity of the Victorians.
Yeah.
And yeah, we just again had a great time looking at that literary analysis for all of those themes, that characterization. Austen was really big on inheritance. That was
Yeah.
a real problem at her time. A
Yeah.
lot of her novels include the issue of when dad croaks, where does it all go?
Right.
And just looking at that, and even the interpretation that Mr. Bennett is like a low key villain. He's
Yeah.
not quite a protagonist.
I think we've talked about this
We
before.
have. How Miss Bennett maybe wasn't as crazy as everybody likes to think that she is when you really look at it. And so, again, a super fun class with Brit Lit. And then we are finishing out. I should guess not finishing out, but the last class that I'm teaching in the cycle there is the full year Shakespeare class.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we're doing the 6 plays. Typically, with my other classes, prior students know, I like to do 4 core assignments for each unit. That would be insane to do for 6 plays,
Yeah.
especially in such a short amount of
Yeah.
time. For me, it's more important that the students enjoy the Shakespeare and they
Yeah.
understand what's even happening, than trying to like shove an academic something down their throats. So I'm spacing them out for the semester.
Mm-hmm.
Romeo and Juliet will be the essay. I have come up with a Midsummer Night's Dream creative assignment that I have been dying to do since last year, so I can't wait for it. And then Much Ado About Nothing will be the presentation, and then we will be doing a unit test, really kind of like our midterm kind of
Yeah.
thing at the end of the semester. And that gives students the opportunity to really shine or
Yeah.
work on the things that they need to. And then each act, as we read the book, has a study guide. So
Mm-hmm.
it'll be finding quotes, explaining quotes. I have one is drawing like the love square connections things from Midsummer Night's Dream. Like, let's see if you followed this bouncing ball
That's
here.
right. It's a mess.
Put in their eyes or not. Um, and so it's not all like just writing and like answering comprehension
Yeah.
questions. Like I can mix it up so it's not boring or the same every
Yeah.
time. So, yeah, I'm like I said, I'm spacing that out. I'm hoping that it'll be a really fun class. I
Yeah.
know a few of my students from this past year, like Miss K, we're coming back for Shakespeare. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hoping for a really good group of kids there with that one.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, you guys, we have a BOGO special going on right now for summer classes. So buy one, get one free. So you can take Hamlet and literary discussion or math for chemistry or any of the other great classes that we have listed for summer. Our 6 week summer session is deliberately skill based classes. So your kids are going to learn skills in every one of the summer sessions. We wanted them to be not just check a box for academics, although they earn a quarter credit, but that they come away with a specific skill in mind. And your kids will dive into lit analysis with with the Hamlet 6 week summer class, and they're going to really understand how to dissect a piece of literature, as well as be able to enter the great conversation of Shakespeare. And is that Victorian? That's not Victorian. That's more Elizabethan literature, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and literary discussion again is dystopian. And so in 1984, great book. Everybody should not just read it, but understand it. So it's one of those benchmark books that your kids should really get a hold of. And with the BOGO special, you can use it for multiple kids in your family. Buy one, get one free. It really makes it a very affordable 6 weeks. So, okay, Anna, I'm super excited about these classes. We haven't talked for a long time. It's kind of weird. Usually we talk on the regular, but this year's
Yeah.
been a little crazy. So good to see you. And I know you've been doing a lot of gardening with your kids.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yes.
outside time. What
Yeah.
are you planting these days?
We are getting ready. I'm finishing our raised beds. We've got tomatoes and green beans and really cute round Parisian carrots. Um,
Oh,
and yeah, we're getting ready to hit 200 hours outside this week,
yay.
which is I'm just tickled pink. Last year we only made 240 hours. Children were a little smaller,
Yeah.
um, so to be hitting 200 hours in May is
Yeah.
super
Wow, that's
exciting.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and just, we moved in October, so just working on settling
You're
in
still
and
getting settled like that,
still
like you're still in a new house mode in many ways, right? This is your
yeah,
first year in this yard, in this
yeah,
garden.
yes.
Fun, fun
So we
times.
are starting from scratch, working on my English garden across the front with my hollyhock and Canterbury bells, and none of this should surprise you, right?
No, no, no. I mean, I'm a big hollyhock girl myself. And that is one thing that does grow out on the Great Plains. Hollyhocks like it here. And
Okay.
honestly, peonies do too, which makes me super happy because they might be my favorite flower. Honestly, Kristen Moon posted white peonies this morning and I was like,
Yes, I
oh,
saw that.
ours are still in bud, but by next week we'll be in peony
Yeah,
mode.
yeah.
So yay. Okay, well, have a good day, you guys. If you have any questions about Hamlet or any of the other classes that Anna teaches, you can leave a comment here and I'll see it or she'll see it, or you can go over to the tribe and there's lots of discussion over there about all the classes. We'd love to chat with you about any questions you might have or, about any of the classes. But don't forget the BOGO and I'll post a link for that here too. Okay, guys, have a great day.
Bye.